So I think one of the main reasons that I was looking forward to a Trump presidency was going to be the entertaining events that were bound to take place on his inauguration day, and looking back at yesterday, we can see that was indeed true. We had mass protests in general, and we still do today, although these ones in particular are extremely liberal, but I won't talk about that here. But as well as that, we also had brilliant vandalism of limos and shop windows, which made Twitter pretty interesting for that day. And above all, I think the best part of that day was, as everyone knows, Richard Spencer getting punched in the face. That genuinely made me happy to see, I'm not going to lie.
It's Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
But as they always do when quote-unquote violent protests take place, and I say violent because no people are actually harmed, but for a lot of liberals and reactionaries, private property holds the same status as people, if not more so. But whenever violent protests like this occurs, you always get the same kind of conversation happening around it. And normally this is something to do with these people shouldn't be engaging in protests because they're just hurting, innocent people who own the property, and they're just hurting their own communities, or they're, hurting the economy or whatever. So that's why I was kind of prompted today to go kind of make a video going over the topic of violent protest under capitalism and what it means. So let's get into it. Right, now Zizek actually makes a brilliant point about violent protest, and it's actually the majority of my video. I am expanding on it a bit, but it really eloquently describes what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to put this clip in now. I'm also going to link to the rest of this talk. I genuinely think this is his second best talk he's ever done. His best one isn't on his channel yet, and I only know about it because I saw it live, but anyway. I think this is one of his best talks. You should definitely watch all of it, but this is the particular clip that's relevant to the topic we're talking about today. So I'm going to play that now, and then after I'll explain it and expand on it myself a bit.
But are such violent demonstrations not often unjust? Many of my liberal, not friends, acquaintances claim, but listen, when people demonstrate, burn cars, whatever, isn't this violent? Do they not hurt the innocent? I claim that it's a much more complex situation. I claim that when we witness these outbursts of rage, we have something that Walter Benjamin called divine violence, which is in a way brutally unjust. It is often something terrifying, not a sublime intervention of divine goodness or justice. For example, to be brutal, a left liberal friend of mine from the University of Chicago told me of a sad experience. When his son reached high school age, he enrolled him into a high school just north from University of Chicago campus, close to a black ghetto, with a majority of black kids. Not long after, his son was returning home with bruises or broken teeth. So what should he have done? Put his son into another school with a white majority, or keep him in this school? The point is that this dilemma is wrong. It cannot be solved at this level, since the very gap between private interest, safety of my son, and global justice bears witness to a situation which has to be overcome. And the same holds for Palestinians stabbing Israelis with knives. Maybe, I think, another case of divine violence. Of course, to be clear, if let's say I am an ordinary citizen, then I walk around Jerusalem, which I don't do regularly, and somebody mistakes me for a Zionist, whatever, attacks me with a knife. Let's not bullshit. Of course I would have, I don't know, run away, defended myself or whatsoever. Of course I would have experienced that as an injustice. But my point is, nonetheless, I don't have the moral right to simply condemn this as a crime.
So basically what Zizek is saying is that when you talk about the idea of violent protest and the problems it causes, and you're attacking that, you're dealing with a problem that can't be solved on the level of the people carrying out the violent protest. You're completely missing the point, basically. When you simply condemn the violent protesters for doing what they're doing, you're just completely ignoring the reason that they're doing this stuff in the first place. But here's the thing, you're not only pinning the problems that caused the violent protests in the first place on the protesters themselves, but you're also attacking something that was bound to happen either way. You see, violent protest is an inevitable result of the class antagonisms which exist within capitalism, and simply saying people shouldn't do this is kind of ridiculous when no matter if they should or shouldn't do it, it's going to happen. This is just an inevitable consequence of capitalist society that we live in. It's like getting mad at earthquakes. Like, obviously you can be upset over the damage that it causes, but you're not going to have a go at the tectonic plates that decided to move that day. So capitalism exists with inherent internal conflicts always taking place within it. And these inherent contradictions lead to a lot of things, not only just violent protests, they also lead to imperialism, revolutions, fascism, all of that lovely stuff. They lead to a lot of things really, so it's kind of difficult to go through everything that it causes because it's so complicated. But what's causing these inherent antagonisms within our current society? Well, the root of all struggle is class struggle, as Marx puts it. Now, what is class struggle though? Well, put very simply, it's basically the conflict of interest between the worker and the employer, where the worker wants as high as a wage as possible, and the employer wants as low a wage as possible to get maximum profits. Now, what does this have to do with rioting and all of that stuff? Well, it's very complicated, but we'll get to that. So capitalism always exists with this conflict of interest between the main two groups of people that exist within society, the workers and the capitalists. So what does the capitalist, the one in power, do to ease this conflict of interest in their favour? And what does the worker do as well? Well, what the worker does is they'll go on strike, they'll form unions, they'll demand higher wages, all of that typical things that you expect to see. Of course, in the past, you'd have a lot more kind of worker resistance than you do today. So the workers would be going out their way much more to kind of bend the will of the capitalists to what their demands are. And these can be very creative things, but more or less it kind of comes down to the fact that if the workers aren't willing to work, then the capitalist can't make any money, so they essentially hold the capitalist's own property hostage from him, or something like that. We don't really get that today anymore, but it was very prominent, maybe 100 years ago. So to avoid this, what does the capitalist do? Now, the capitalist employs a state apparatus in order to ease class struggle in his favour. This can include things like the media, telling workers that they don't need higher wages or that they should be grateful for what they have now, things like that. But it also can include the police force, say when a group of workers does get together or goes on strike, occupies a workplace. That's when the capitalist can bring in his police force to remove these workers by force, and bringing other workers who are willing to work for the same or maybe even lower wages. So we have this war taking place in society between the workers and the capitalists. And we can see this today, how the media will always seem to talk about how immigrants are sucking up the welfare, but hardly ever about how corporations pay minimal tax, which actually loses the country so much more money than immigrants make money, for the UK at least. And obviously we can see with the police how they are blatantly enemies of the people. I don't really think I need to go into too much detail on that one. And there are more factors in capitalism as well, which will cause increases in the likelihoods of violent outbursts. We have the fact that people in poorer conditions are much more likely to engage in violence because they feel like they have less to lose, they are simply more angry about the fact that they have no control or power of their lives, things like that. I mean, it's the whole thing of crime correlates with poverty. Another reason is that people feel powerless through peaceful methods, engaging through the pre-existing system to cause change. Because when you see a candidate that you feel talks to you and really relates to you, like Bernie Sanders, for example, but then you see all the rampant corruption which made it so he didn't really have a chance to begin with, you're going to feel like, hey, clearly you can't go down this route. You have to take other options, and really the only other option is some form of violence, and that kind of the whole communist revolution thing, where it's like the capitalists aren't willingly going to give up their own power, but that's kind of a bit of a different topic. I'm just explaining how people might feel alienated and disenfranchised from mainstream politics, so they turn to more violent outbursts. And again, this is an inherent part of, both of these things are inherent parts of capitalism, because obviously in capitalism, people are going to be poor no matter what you do, because otherwise the concept of rich and poor doesn't make any sense. And secondly, because the state is owned by the ruling class, it doesn't serve in the interest of the proletariat. Otherwise it would be a dictatorship of the proletariat, which obviously we don't live in today, because the working class don't really have a say on how things are run. And I can point to countless examples over this, but off the top of my head, who the fuck actually wants to be at war with the Middle East? But it's profitable, so that's what we're doing. So yeah, that means that the state is not owned by the workers, therefore the workers have little to no say in how the state is run, and this makes people feel powerless, it makes people feel like their only option is violent outburst. So really, violent outbursts like this are inherent to capitalism, because class struggle is inherent to capitalism, meaning these class antagonisms are inherent to capitalism. So really, when you try to attack violent protesters and you say, oh no, these people shouldn't do that, it's ridiculous, because you're trying to attack a concept or an event which is going to happen either way. And I also kind of wanted to talk a bit for a minute, and kind of talk to other leftists for a moment. Now, there are actually people almost getting mad at the anarchists, I think they were, that were doing some of the violence, engaging in some of the violence yesterday. And there's also two main reasons. One, it wasn't organised violence, it was random outbursts, so it didn't mean anything. Yeah, that's totally true, but what the fuck do you expect? Personally, I'm happy enough that there were people on the streets breaking windows while waving red and black flags. I was very happy to see that. I know it's not going to amount to anything, but hey, at least it's a nice little reminder that there's some hope. There's a little bit of hope. And there are also some people that, weirdly enough, were saying it's bad for the left's image. But that seems to be implying that we should go with the alternative, and basically acting like good little boys for the sake of liberals and reactionaries, so they don't say we're violent and out of control, when, even if they're not saying that, they're still going to hate us anyway. At the very least, we may as well make ourselves known, make a scene, because we're not keeping anyone happy no matter what we do, as long as we're existing, like, yeah. And I mean, violence is actually a great way to get your message out there, unfortunately, but that's just how the world is. But how many more people do you think now know about anarchism or leftism in general, because of the mass reporting on this actually relatively small amount of violence that was taking part in yesterday, when you compare it to the rest of all the protests? And even if they don't necessarily see it in a relatively good light, I'd rather that than no light at all. Anyways, I just wanted to make a quick video kind of going over the topic of violent protests, and I kind of delved into the workings of class struggle a bit more than I intended to, but hey, it's all related, it's all fun, so I hope everyone learned something, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.